Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of the Curly Girl Book Tour. I am having some great conversations with some dynamic women from all across the country, and tonight is no different. I'm excited about tonight's guest. Oh my gosh, there's so much to say about her, but let me just introduce her and then we'll get straight to the conversation. Dr. Yaba Blay, she's got many titles, including professor, therapist, scholar, activist, public speaker, consultant, and truth teller. Her work centers around lived experiences of Black women and girls with a particular focus on identity, body politics, and beauty practices. She's the author of a book titled One Drop, Shifting the Lens on Race, discussing Black racial identity and skin color politics. She also executive produced a professional Black girl series, which I was privileged enough to be featured in during season 2 in New Orleans alongside some amazing women. Please help me welcome Dr. Yaba Blay.
I am cracking up at the pictures.
I told you they were coming. I went dove deep on your Instagram.
I see.
Hey, you didn't have too many posts to go through, so it wasn't bad.
Good.
Doctor, thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you for inviting me. Congratulations.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so people have given you, many titles, probably called you many things behind your back, to your face, online. How do you identify yourself?
That's always changing. It depends on who asks.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the context. I have been many things, and I'll probably be many more. So, at heart, I'm an educator. I do think of myself as a storyteller, a scholar, an activist. A creative, a cultural producer. I do consulting work. I'm a writer, so it's always hard to try and come up with just one term.
Mm-hmm. I've heard you identify yourself as a dark-skinned, nappy-headed, first-generation Ghanaian, raised in New Orleans, and just there's so much compacted into that one phrase right there. For you, identifying as nappy headed.
I use kinky.
Kinky. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Because that's the reason I'm asking it. Because, sometimes people say those terms, kinky, nappy headed, bad hair, as a negative connotation. But you've kind of taken that word, the kinky, back and owned it.
Yeah, it is what it is. I think that the connotation, whether or not it's negative, again, it depends on the context. And oftentimes, what it's said in comparison. But with that particular short bio, I write it in that way and present it in that way because I think we take a lot of words for granted and language is very important. So it's not enough to just say I'm a Black woman. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know what image is going to come to your mind when you hear Black woman. So I want to be clear that I'm a dark skin, and even dark skin depends upon the comparison point. I tell people all the time, I live in the Northeast now, what's light skin to me and what's light skin to folks in Philly, like the spectrum it's a different, range, and so even the language of natural hair, there's an entire spectrum of what that means. And so I think a lot of times the language that we use, it just simplifies and kind of conflates our experiences. So I like to be as specific as possible.
Mm-hmm. And even in this conversation, I've been intentionally saying curly girl because natural hair typically is, related to Black women or used in that term, but curly girls come in all colors. There's the red-headed curly girls, there's the white curly girls, there's, a broad range. So, we can kind of fit a lot of women into this conversation. But I wanted to ask you specifically, having those words used negatively toward our hair and our appearance, how do you think that kind of affects our relationship or shapes our relationship with ourselves as we grow up?
I think we've all had maybe not all, but many of us have, our own stories. And children, as much as we love them and they're cute, they're also very mean. And it's something that they do, right? That they, in their process, I think, of like finding themselves or coming into their own identity, so much of our experiences in comparison to other people, you know? And so like calling somebody else's hair nappy or kinky is often compared to a particular ideal, you know, that calls beautiful a particular look versus ugly. And particularly, and I'm speaking specifically for, you know, the Black identity and a Black racial identity. You know, it's a struggle for Black girls, you know, and it's even bigger than just talking about, oh, the white media and what the white media shows. We can talk specifically about so-called Black media, you know, in terms of what Black folks come to consider as beautiful. And so if you're constantly looking on the television and seeing Black women whose hair looks a particular way and it looks nothing like yours, you know, then you come to identify in the negative, unless you are like wrapped in love and centered in a community that actually puts in deliberate effort to tell you differently.
The relationship you've had with your hair, we saw some of the pictures there for a moment. What's your relationship been like with your hair growing up through the years? Because now you got the short cropped hair. I've seen different things and variations, but have you always loved your kinky hair, or did you ever have a hate-love relationship with it? How's it been?
I've been through all manner of changes. I mean, culturally, you know, again, I'm first generation. And so my family comes from Ghana. And in Ghana, you know, girls' hair is cut very short until they go to college. And so most little girls have very short haircuts. And so my parents moved to this country. My mother didn't know how to do hair because little girls don't get their hair done in the same way. It's a different hair culture in Ghana. If anything, their hair would be much shorter than mine. You know, culturally speaking, in terms of femininity for little girls, like you're required to have earrings. Like my ears were pierced when I was 2 days old. You know, you got to have earrings and you got to have waist beads. Hair wasn't something that my mother knew how to do. So then, particularly having me born and raised in New Orleans, where there is, particularly for little girls, there's a hair culture that's very much, I think, connected to Haitian culture in many ways. Because when I see little Haitian schoolgirls, they all have their big bows, you know. And when I think of, you know, little girls in New Orleans in their Catholic school uniforms, you got your matching bows and the bobos on the end. And my hair didn't do that. And so one of my favorite school pictures, it's my favorite because my mother put rubber bands in my hair. And I mean like the kind of rubber bands that came around the newspaper rubber bands. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
One. Like,
it is my favorite.
Rip your hair out.
Because it's like, bless your heart, lady. You know? So I had these rubber bands at the base, and then, you know, my hair was doing its own thing with the barrettes on the, like.
I think we just saw that picture.
No, I don't think it's in this.
No? Okay.
That was another, somebody else probably put those bows in my hair. But she tried, you know? And so for me, the comparison point, again, it wasn't white girls. For me, it was other Black girls. And my hair didn't hang. My hair did what it wanted to do differently. And so there was always, I think, a sense that I was different, and then added to my complexion as well. And so, again, because my mother didn't know how to do my hair, I feel like I got a jerry curl when I was probably like 7 years old. And then we went through the jerry curl phase, and from the jerry curl to a relaxer. So I didn't know my natural hair until I went natural right after graduating from high school.
Okay. And you intentionally made that choice?
Yeah, I mean, I came up, you know, it was a very black time, pro-Black time. And many of us came into our consciousness, you know, while we were still in high school. Very anti-apartheid movement was heavy and strong. The Nation of Islam was heavy and strong. I was wearing head wraps, you know. I was flexing because I was African, you know. So I went natural early, and then I got a perm again, and then I went natural again. And so I've, you know, braids and weaves and all manner of things. But I think for me, if there's a question about whether or not I love your hair or you're able to love your hair. I think it has to do with what I'm learning now is that I have a different relationship with my hair now because I know what to do with it. And when you don't know what to do with it, I know so many women, particularly women who first go natural, so much frustration, not to mention the money that we spend trying to figure it out, So on this side of things, that's why I think it's important for us to get clear about the language and to broaden our understanding about, the diversity of natural hair. Because, just to call it natural and then you go into the store and it says it's for natural, like what works on your hair will laugh at my hair. What works on my hair will weigh your hair. You know what I mean? Like we have different hair. And so all of us, and you can have different hair in different parts of your head. You know what I mean? So it takes so much time to learn, what works best for your hair. And so without that, I wouldn't call it a hatred as much as a frustration.
Yeah.
A frustration because you don't know what to do with your hair.
And it's not, you go to hairstylists who don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Who claim they know what to do with it. And then you end up going home crying because it was not what you expected. I have a hairstylist who I work with now who tries to eliminate certain terminology from our vocabulary, like good hair, bad hair. Sure. Those things that have a connotation that tend to make us not like it. Sure. It really tries to educate women on how to do it because, like you said, the frustration really comes in because when you don't know how to do it, you're just like, I don't want to go through this journey and, not have any idea of what I'm doing. And like, that's why I really have been intentional about really putting this information out there for women to understand, like everyone's journey is their own. Sure. Everyone's not going to have the same experience and you have to find out what works for you.
Yeah, you also have to find community because I think even for as intentional as we hope to be, mm-hmm. still are replicating some of the problems even within the so-called natural hair community. I'm not a curly girl. My daughter wouldn't have been a curly girl. My granddaughters wouldn't have been a curly girl. And so there have to be other books, to speak about even, again, the different textures, because even within the natural hair community, I think there's still a
classist.
There's a priority, not even prioritization. It's like an idealization of curly hair. So anytime a sister wants to go natural, they're thinking their hair is going to come out looking like yours. Mm-hmm. And that's not true, boo. And so even when we talk about I don't like the 3A, the 3B, the 4A, like the
categorizing.
The categorizing, it's a hierarchy still. Because when you look up the whole categorization, a 1A is a white woman with straight hair. And you made her a 1A. And
she's number one. And
a 4C. We're still doing it.
Yeah.
We're still doing it.
There's levels within the levels.
Yeah.
And I guess, I really wanted to have you on this book tour because, to break down like you say, the politics of, our appearance and politics of natural hair, maybe. Why is it seen as so unnatural for us to show up in our natural state with our curls?
White supremacy. When we talk about beauty standards, again, we live in a history, in a society that has always privileged whiteness, not only as the, ideal for humanity, but the ideal for beauty, and for women, particularly in a patriarchal society where, for so long, the only value that was projected onto women's bodies was based upon their ability to have children. Right. And to keep a home. So in a patriarchal society, we know that, it's the reason why you go from your father's last name to your husband's last name, because it's a transference of property. Who can take care of you? You can't take care of yourself. And so as a woman, in order to survive, you have to be chosen. And if men are saying that if men are saying that they want a beautiful woman, then beauty becomes a competition. Because who's going to get chose? I can't afford to be out here by myself. because I can't take care of myself any other way. If I don't have children, I have contributed nothing to this society. So beauty becomes a competition. If there's a competition, think beauty pageants, right? Who's going to win and based upon what? What do beauty queens tend to look like over history? And so again, just in general society, white women have always been placed at the helm as the kind of model. Like they come to determine what beauty is. And so for everybody else, you try to figure out how your beauty compares, or even if you have the capacity to identify as beautiful, whatever your capacity to be seen as beautiful really depends upon your ability to look like her, to look like this white woman. So for Black women, historically within our communities, you know, even before and beyond a Madam C.J. Walker, we weren't talking about embracing natural hair. We were trying to figure out all the ways in which we could change our hair so that it could look more like, right, white women's hair. And so the aesthetic of beauty has always been about straight hair in a lot of ways, right, over time. And what's so interesting, just because it's not just a Black-white conversation, so many people think that Madam C.J. Walker invented the straightening comb, which she did not. The straightening comb was actually invented by a Jewish man. It was repatented by another African-American whose name I cannot remember in this moment, but it was invented by a Jewish man because many Jewish people also have thick, curly hair. And if the aesthetic of whiteness is straight hair, they are also invested in being seen and received as white and receiving the privileges that come with whiteness. So they too are invested in straightening their hair, right? And so that white ideal impacts even white people, right? And so in that context, of course, showing up with your hair curly is seen as unprofessional, right? Unkempt, you know, not beautiful. What you gonna do with your hair? Aren't you gonna comb your hair? Because it's always been about what are you going to do to yourself to look better, to look more like her. And so there's been a constant reminder, constant reflections wherever we look that we are not okay as we are. And the beauty industry has depended upon that because now there are things that you need to buy, capitalism. There are things that you need to buy in order to get closer to this thing called beauty. So within that context, yeah, natural hair isn't okay.
So look, you brought up so many points in that conversation. I want to just point out one thing because there was on the day of my reception, I had gotten my hair. I wanted to keep my hair in a natural state, and I got it styled like this. I just pulled this picture off the thing right there. So someone very close to me, after I had gotten my hair done, my hair was done, said to me, "Oh, what you gonna do to your hair?
What you gonna do to that hair?"
And I laughed it off because that's just the personality of who I was dealing with. But that came from an older adult in my family. How early on are we telling young girls that showing up with our curls is not okay?
From birth.
Yeah, because I mean, it's very early on in the book. Curly Girl, Bailey deals with it. She's 8 or 9, I would say. She's on the 2nd grade, whatever age that is.
7, 8.
Yeah, so she goes to school. She gets made fun of, and she comes home and puts a scarf over her head because she wants her hair to lay down flat and straight, like you said. So our girls are hearing this from very early on.
And you know what? I think we also have to recognize that it's not even just the hearing it, because there's so many parents who would say, I don't say those things to my daughter. So it's not about the words. It's also about the actions and the affirmations and the lack of affirmations. It's also about the games they're playing, the shows they're watching, the dolls. Like when I was little, I wasn't allowed to have white baby dolls. It was a rule because my father said that they make black baby dolls for a reason. And that reason is you. If you are, I mean, you can take it back to the Clark doll studies. If you go on YouTube right now, people are continuously replicating these doll studies where you sit down a kindergartner, a preschooler, You show them two dolls and you ask them which one is the good doll, which one is the bad doll, which one is beautiful, which one is ugly, which one is smarter, so on and so forth. 9 times out of 10, these children are continuously assigning the highest value to the white baby.
Right.
Over and over and over and over again. So this is not about parents sitting them down and saying, you're bad because you're Black. It's about every code, every signal, every sign that they're getting from their the entirety of their environment. And so it's such a difficult job to be a parent of Black children, particularly, because you have to be so regimented in a particular way. You have to be on alert at all times about what your children are consuming. And these are conversations that I've had, since I was a young parent moving forward, the arguments that I've had with so many folks who feel like it was wrong for me to tell my daughter she couldn't have a white doll. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, help me understand that. Like, we've bought into this notion of we are the world, right? But we are the world would mean that there are dolls of every color, every nation, every ethnicity, and that we give them all the same value. And we don't. We treat them like they're a special project. So you can have 16 white dolls in a Barbie collection and you get one Black one and we're supposed to feel seen.
And celebrate it.
Or you have a children's TV show on Disney Network and the whole school is white and you got one Black girl, one Asian girl, one girl from South. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's not how the world works,
That's representation.
No, and representation is not enough.
As a mother and grandmother, how would you advise parents who are raising curly girls to help them deal with those situations where they may be getting bullied about their hair?
Well, it has to start before there's a problem, right? You can't give the affirmation after they've already been assaulted. Mm. The affirmation has to start from the beginning, so it creates a normalcy, if that makes sense. Like, the child has to know they're normal and beautiful as they are before they enter into spaces where they're going to feel assaulted, because then they have at least some level of defense or at least some level of confusion. Like, Bailey's like, these kids said my hair. Like, where'd they come from? I was fine before I
when I get to that space, yeah.
But if you weren't fine before you got there, then you're gonna believe that, right?
Yeah, and that's why this book, I think, is hitting home with a lot of people, because Bailey, before the world gets to her, she loves herself. Nobody could tell her nothing about her high pony posts, and then she gets to that environment where she is torn down, but she is reminded at home with her family and her mom and dad, and seeing someone she admires on television, that she is beautiful. And that, like you said, that affirmation comes before we're taken down.
But again, that's the work of parenting. And I don't know that we understand the work of parenting, because again, you can't just give your child the remote control and let them go on about their business. There's so much. And it might not even just be, it's not even the TV anymore, it's their phones, it's their iPads, it's the internet. It's so much that they're being exposed to. And again, for me, I think, particularly, again, speaking for Black folks, we have to be more critical, and we have to stop feeling like representation is enough, because again, the mainstream media, with all love, Casey, is going to put you on the screen and say, this is a Black woman. If I'm looking at the screen, Casey, I don't see myself. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough that you're a Black woman. What kind of Black woman? Like, you're sending a particular message when you put particular images on screen for all of us, And so there's still a repetitive representation of Blackness in a particular way. Like, and not to wake it all up, but like, would we have, well, we already have the answer, but of course, Kamala Harris is the first Black woman vice president. Why not Stacey Abrams? Mm-hmm. It's just a question. Just a question.
We're going to leave that there. I'm going to ask the people in the comments, if anybody who's watching, if y'all have any questions for Dr. Blay while we're wrapping up. We have about 5 minutes left in this conversation. If you have any questions you'd like to ask her on this topic or any topic that we've discussed, go ahead and chime in. I follow you on all your pages. you are intentional about sharing Black beauty and highlighting Black joy, and making sure that Black voices are seen in a way that we can all celebrate. Why do you think it's so important for us to have more positive images of Blackness in our social media, in our media, in whatever we're consuming.
Because we know what happens when we don't.
Yep.
Right. And we're in a space now where we have more creative freedom. So what are we going to do with that creative freedom? If we have the ability to create our own platforms and to sustain our own audiences and communities, what are we going to do with that? We're going to just continue to replicate the images, you know? And again, people don't give enough, I'm not going to say credit, but like, I don't know that we understand just how powerful the media is. Most people get all of their sense of reality from the media, right? If you never get up out of your seat and get on a plane and travel the world, the television and the media will make you think you know what places look like, right? You know who people that come from certain places look like without thinking critically or even knowing to think critically that the media is also political. Just because it's on a screen doesn't make it true. Just because it's in a book doesn't make it a fact. That there are people who insert their voice, their opinion, their perspective, right, on how things should be. And so the history of the media has also been very deliberate in showing Black folks in a negative way, because that's how you justify our oppression, right? That's how we naturally act, you know? So I think it's important for us to, it's not even about creating, because I also don't like that, because I think some people go overboard trying to, because what's positive? And who gets to determine what positive is? That's a judgment call. So if the only thing you think is positive is to have a Black woman be the vice president of this country, or a Black woman in a business suit, or a Black woman who looks so-called professional and speaks a particular way, right? What makes that positive? Positive according to whom? Whereas for me, positive is like what I did with Professional Black Girl. It's showing second line culture. It's showing Mardi Gras. It's showing us in our fullest, blackest selves, so that you don't go into another space feeling like you have to code switch and be. Even when we talk about the whole debauchery that took up 2 weeks of social media space, where folks are arguing about bonnets.
Yeah.
Y'all still worried about, that's what we doing?
Bigger priorities, people.
So yes, I don't even know what the question was, but
that's I mean, the way I worded the question about positive images, that's beautiful that you say it. I mean, positive images of Blackness, it's relative to who is seeing them.
Right. I don't judge everybody's ideas of positive. What you think is positive may not be what I think is positive at all. I actually think most of what is projected as Black positivity is actually quite offensive and violent for the large majority of Black people who cannot access that image of positivity. It's elitist.
I will say I'm quite tired of seeing in the media depictions of slavery and depictions of, you know, Black children being shot in the street. Like, those are the things that they want to tell the stories about, but we live it. We don't have to see it in the media.
And I think it differently.
Okay.
We might need to see it. White folks need to keep seeing it.
Okay.
So we can't separate. Like, I'm not letting you off the hook ever. So we're going to show images of enslavement forever because you like to forget.
Right. We would like to not have to be bombarded with it all the time. But yes.
But I also think that the thing is, because we're so deprived of representation, we want to make decisions about what should be represented as if how much whiteness is in the media. You see the full gamut of their humanity, and we get this much of the pie. So we fighting with ourselves about, well, we only going to get this much airtime. What we going to show in this little bit of airtime? Why we can't have the full diversity of Blackness? It's all of it. We should not have to choose about, we want to see this and not that. They get to see everything.
Right.
They get to see everything.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I want to see more of our real life experiences.
Absolutely.
Across the board. We did have one question. I don't know if you have time just for this one question.
Yeah.
How do we stop? Go ahead, bring it in. How do we stop females, women, femme, from attacking each other about the way we look? It's so hard sometimes when I start with white supremacy. We're so attuned to disrespecting each other, and it's sad.
I mean, again, I think that has to do with the connection to beauty and feminine identity, right? Being linked in terms of our value. And so, you know, we're talking real talk. I'm sure you've heard the language of pick-me's, right? That describes some women as pick-me's, the type of women who will get in the comments. Like, for example, for those of you connected to social media, I'm on social media way too much. There was a post, maybe last week, week before last, where this brother on Facebook made a post and said that something about dark-skinned women couldn't wear any color wig. It just didn't look right, right? Lots of great jokes came out of that and draggings on him for saying that. But if you were to go to that original post and look in the comments, how many women came to his defense? How many women were saying he's right? You know what I mean? Light skin, dark skin, whatever. How many women saying those folks who were attacking him were taking it too far? And I always, and maybe I'm wrong for thinking like, particularly in, you know, not just white supremacy, but within patriarchy, like how does it serve us ultimately, right? Tear each other down. Again, we can't forget that ultimately, whether we want to admit it or not, we are acting like it is a competition. We're acting like it's there's only so many spots available, right? Seriously. And so one of us is going to get it. And so if the way to build myself up is to tear you down, then that's how I'm going to do it, I think.
Dr. Blay, I could sit in on one of your lectures anytime. We're going to wrap things up because I don't want to hold too much of your time, but I did want to end with this beautiful compilation of curly girls who have been reading the book.
Oh, hey you.
Beautiful. I have really just enjoyed seeing the smiles and the faces of the diversity of the girls who are reading this book, and you know, that's really just bringing me joy to see that. And I know you've gotten to read it. Yeah. Any thoughts on, you know, the book in itself?
I mean, it's adorable. You know, and I collect books for Black girls. Awesome. Not just for my granddaughters. I get them a copy, I get myself a copy. Because again, these weren't books that I had access to growing up. And so it's always amazing to me to see images, you know, and stories that little Black girls can access just so that they can also see themselves, you know? So I think it's beautiful.
Thank you for supporting. I really appreciate you.
Of course.
We're going to wrap things up. Thank you, Dr. Blay. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back on Wednesday and Friday of this week. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.